July 1916. A single day of fighting shatters romantic illusions about warfare forever. The 20th century's first great tragedy, fought on a landscape of suffering never before imagined. The Battle of the Somme. By 1916, World War I had transformed the border between Germany and France into a panorama of unrelenting horror. In February of that year, the German army focused a massive attack on the French city of Verdun in an attempt to break through the Western Front and drive on to Paris, less than 150 miles away. For 10 months, the Germans had punished Verdun with pitched infantry attacks and a never-ending bombardment of heavy artillery. 90,000 Frenchmen were killed or wounded in the first 6 weeks of battle, earning Verdun the gruesome nickname, the Mincer. A German breakthrough seemed certain. Still, the French hung on, rallied by the promise of Verdun commander General Henri Pétain. Ils ne passeront pas. They shall not pass. French Chief of Staff General Joffre, stunned by escalating casualties, demanded help from Great Britain. The English had planned a late summer offensive for 1916, but General Joffre insisted that if they didn't get help before then, quote, the French army would cease to exist. The new date for the British attack was set at July 1st. The place, Germany's Western Front, along a 17-mile region north of the slow-moving River Somme. The strategy of the massive Somme offensive was intended to turn the tide of a war that had so far brought victory to the Germans. But this battle would forever alter the nature of modern warfare. Allied hopes rested on the volunteers of England's new army, called Kitchener's Army, after the British Minister of War, Lord Horatio Kitchener. In 2 years, German machine guns and artillery had destroyed about 70% of the British expeditionary forces, the professional soldiers who until now made up the backbone of the English military. To replace the professionals, Lord Kitchener launched a wildly successful recruitment campaign. It boosted the military by a remarkable 500,000 soldiers, but it set the stage for tragedy. To serve king and country, entire English villages, schools, unions, and even athletic clubs proudly enlisted as groups. Kitchener promised those who joined together should serve together. Called pals or chums battalions, their fate was especially harrowing. The fever of patriotism only served to mask the folly of recruiting entire units from the same communities. War was still the stuff of 19th century romanticism, promising glory, travel, and escape from working-class drudgery. Since a Europe-wide conflict had not taken place since 1871, there were few living soldiers to offer warnings about war's grim reality. England's hastily trained recruits were about to experience the nightmare of battle in the modern age. By the summer of 1916, World War I was a campaign of position, not mobility. From the North Sea to the Swiss frontier, progress was measured in yards as soldiers from both armies dug themselves into trenches to defend their positions. The deadly new weapons literally forced the infantry underground. The typical British trench, seen here in side view, was 7 or 8 feet deep and 6 to 7 feet wide. Thick walls of sandbags gave protection from machine gun bullets and splintering artillery shells. On the Western Front, there were 12,000 miles of trenches on the Allied side alone. While the British High Command feared comfortable trenches would restrain forward movement, across the lines, the Germans built entire underground fortresses. Bitter cold and constant rain intensified the misery of sporadic machine gun and artillery attacks. With every rain, the trenches became ankle-deep in mud. Wounded men were known to drown in flooded defenses meant to protect them. And the filth of the trenches produced a host of diseases carried by lice and other vermin. But most horrifying to the troops was the plague of rats, which grew to incredible size by gorging on bodies littering the no-man's land between the Allied and German trenches. Dozens of soldiers recalled seeing corpses long dead stir and even roll over, only to learn they were being stripped of their flesh by rats. It was said you could smell the Western Front long before you could see it. Despite their best efforts to cope with resupply and sanitation, the politicians and planners in charge of the war let the English soldiers down. Living in the trenches would ultimately cause more British casualties than the Germans. Statistics compiled after the Great War revealed the shocking truth. While 2.5 million casualties resulted from battle, 3.5 million were caused by sickness and disease. Yet to British soldiers about to fight at the Somme, dying of disease was the least of their worries. In the battle ahead, they would face a modern killing tool that would forever change the face of battle: the machine gun.
The Human Animal, Saturday at 10 on TLC.
You can taste the difference when a Chardonnay is aged in small, expensive oak barrels. Fine Chardonnay has to be made expensively. It just doesn't have to be sold that way. Napa Ridge Chardonnay, a great tasting wine at a price that you can't miss.
No one knows precisely when man discovered his sense of humor. But there are a few theories about where. Ireland, the ancient birthplace of good times. 1-week motor coach tours from $5.99, including hotel. Call 1-800-SHAMROCK for a free vacation kit.
Here's the choice: Thompson's now or rebuild later. Over time, water invisibly weakens unprotected wood. Used regularly, Thompson's Water Seal Waterproofer helps stop costly damage. Keep up your protection. Maintain your investment with Thompson's now.
The city never sleeps. When most of us go home, that's when the professional cleaners go to work. But not with ordinary household cleaners. They go with professional strength. Now you can too. 409 introduces its professional strength formula. New Pro 409 Spray Cleaner. Super concentrated Pro 409 cleans the toughest grease and grime, even in water. To clean like a pro, get new professional strength Pro 409.
The plague started slowly, but soon no one was safe. The moans of its victims drifted through doorways, and unburied bodies littered the streets. A bakery caught fire, and few were alarmed. Then the flames spread, and kept on spreading. Finally, an entire city was no more than ashes. 2 years of disaster. But London survives. Britain's Fire and Fever. Tonight at 10 on TLC Presents.
Until the beginning of the 20th century, an armed soldier could fire at most 15 bullets a minute. Thanks to Hiram Maxim, American inventor of the machine gun, a World War I infantryman could fire 600. By giving one man the firepower of 40, the machine gun redefined the tactics and terror of warfare. Against it, the British rested their hopes on the devastating preemptive effects of artillery. Unlike machine guns, artillery had been around for centuries. By World War I, however, quick-firing field guns and high-explosive shells made these devastating weapons the deciding factor in any conflict. It was into this maelstrom of revolutionary weapons and unspeakable conditions that 100,000 British soldiers from Kitchener's army made their way as July 1st, 1916 approached. Few of these green recruits had any idea of what to expect from war. None had ever experienced combat. Their fate lay in the hands of the man in charge of planning the Somme offensive, General Sir Douglas Haig, Commander-in-Chief of the British Expeditionary Force. To win the battle, Haig himself had to master the new science of 20th century warfare. It was a task for which the general was sorely unequipped. General Sir Douglas Haig would become the central and most controversial figure in high command during the Great War. The dour Scotsman was a leader of great experience, determination, and professionalism. But with help from the Fourth Army's commander, General Rawlinson, the offensive Haig planned revealed a tragic misunderstanding of the weapons and tactics of trench warfare on the Western Front. General Haig's goals were to bring the British Army into position for victory, to rescue the French from certain disaster at Verdun, and to inflict heavy losses on the Germans. To achieve these goals, Haig planned an assault along a 17-mile sector in Picardy near the river Somme in northern France. Soldiers' blood was nothing new to this ground. Henry V had fought for these hills, marshes, and woodlands in 1415. Napoleon had done the same in 1815. Yet the Somme had never seen a battle as earth-shattering as the one to come. Through 2 years of war, all had been quiet on this tiny sector of the Western Front. Now, British reconnaissance and increased shelling in preparation for the offensive alerted the Germans to beef up their defenses. They dug in with mining-style shafts up to 40 feet deep, sufficient to withstand any bombardment. In later years, Sir Winston Churchill would remark, the French and British commanders had selected for their offensive what was undoubtedly the strongest and most perfectly defended position in the world. General Haig entrusted his main attack to the new Fourth Army. They were to take the German positions from Serres to Montauban and the river Angre. Haig optimistically called for 3 cavalry divisions to exploit the gaps in the German lines achieved by the Fourth Army, then push on behind enemy lines. The commander-in-chief sensed that this may be the cavalry's last opportunity to play a major role in battle. They would never get their chance. To ensure the success of the main attack, Haig ordered a simultaneous diversionary attack from the Third Army to the north. They were charged with taking Gommecourt, a well-defended German position, and diverting attention from the major attack to the south. Haig planned a massive 5-day artillery bombardment to soften German defenses. General Rawlinson assured him that 5 days of cannon thunder would destroy the German defenses and kill most, if not all, the enemy. Critically, the barrage was also supposed to obliterate the thick belts of barbed wire that protected German trenches. The bombardment would accomplish none of these objectives. On June 24th, 1916, the shelling commenced. Small cannons fired 18 and 60-pound rounds loaded with shrapnel and high explosives. Howitzers lobbed massive shells weighing between 100 and 1,800 pounds. The bombardment stretched from 5 days to 7. 1,500 cannons fired 1.5 million shells. You'll be able to go over the top with a walking stick. You'll not need rifles, one officer promised his men. You'll find all the Germans dead. Not even a rat will have survived. In a letter to his wife, General Haig suggested that God himself had guided his hand in creating these battle plans. He wrote, "The wire has never been so well cut, nor the artillery preparation so thorough." But the general's words would prove tragically incorrect.
Hey, America, something's missing from your sandwich. The great taste of cheese. This turkey sandwich is as plain as it can be, but add some zesty cheese. It's such a hit, they'll vote it MVP.
Love it with cheese.
Give your sandwich a new attitude with cheese.
Darling, you are perfection. So bright, so crisp, and I'm not just buttering you up. Bird's eye, a fresh look for vegetables.
Now Leg's Smooth Silhouette's pantyhose changes the rules. Don't spend your life in the gym. Don't skip dessert. Just look like you did with new Smooth Silhouettes from Legs. A whole new kind of pantyhose. They slim and smooth every crucial inch between your tummy and your toes. It's gorgeous redefined. So don't be afraid to show off. New Smooth Silhouettes from Legs. Nothing beats a great pair of legs.
Mortgage payments, college tuition, career choices. People can get so lost in their day-to-day concerns they avoid planning for their retirement. Unfortunately, that's life. New York Life has all kinds of life insurance policies to help make sure you enjoy your retirement. We can even help you catch up if you started planning late. That's New York Life, the company you keep.
Monday on the Learning Channel. In the Old West, no other word aroused such fear. In Hollywood, no other culture was so misunderstood. But the secrets of the Apache date back centuries before. A history of roaming and hunting, peace and trade. Now follow the trail of these celebrated people as science unearths a new view of the origins and violent struggles of the Apache on archaeology. Monday night at 8 on the Learning Channel.
This is you. This is the commercial you see. This is the number you call. This is the box that comes. This is the machine you get. This is the number you call. These are the exercises you do. This is how long it takes. This is how often you do it. This is the number you call. This is how you'll feel when you're done. The SoloFlex Muscle Machine. Just $39 a month. Call now for a free brochure and video. This is the number you call.
Call 800-453-7700 for a free brochure and a $100 certificate towards your next vacation in Singapore, the most surprising tropical island on Earth.
At dawn on July 1st, 1916, from Goncourt to Montauban, the British soldiers of the Chums brigades awaited the battle. Many had taken communion the day before. In his final letter home, Lieutenant John Ingle of the 16th London Regiment wrote, "Never have I attended a more impressive service. I placed my body in God's keeping, and I'm going into battle with his name on my lips." Some had skipped breakfast for fear of being shot in a full stomach. Most had downed a strong shot of Navy rum. Last-minute reconnaissance gave the British High Command chilling news. Their night patrols had sighted belts of German barbed wire still fully intact. But the generals dismissed these accounts as nothing but the misgivings of men about to go into battle for the first time. At 7:30 a.m., the British guns fell silent. With 60 pounds of gear each, the infantrymen fixed their bayonets and awaited the signal to attack. Then, along the entire 17-mile front, whistles blew and the men climbed over their parapets and formed into waves as ordered. Tragically, the generals had instructed them to walk, not run, to the German front lines. In the British reserve trenches, calm descended as the German cannon switched their fire to the main attack. On the front line, it became a race against time. The German machine gunners climbed out of trenches so deep they'd not been touched by the British barrage. Coolly, they set up their machine guns and looked out over the vast fields of infantry advancing slowly towards them. Then the carnage began. A frenzied, murderous hail of bullets carved huge swaths in the advancing brigades. Wave after wave of soldiers fell in growing formations of dead and wounded. Within minutes, the no-man's land between the lines was covered with the bodies of entire battalions that had advanced only a few yards. Down they all went, one surviving private reported, dropping one after the other as the guns swept along them. And the next wave came forward, and this lot didn't get as far as the others. They were caught in a storm of bullets. By now, German artillery was raining accurate shell fire directly into the massed ranks of the 3rd and 4th Armies. Machine guns continued their deliberate sweeps over the thousands of oncoming men. Those who escaped the bullets and shells now faced an unforeseen horror. The German barbed wire, supposedly cut to shreds, was in most places completely untouched. The men fought hard to cross it, but were caught on the barbs. In no time, the wire lay tangled with the bodies of men machine-gunned as they tried to struggle free. Through the morning of July 1st, the bitter and bloody fighting continued. By midday, only the extreme right wing of the 4th Army had achieved their objective. And except for the 36th Ulster Division, which advanced far beyond the German trenches, the remainder of the front line presented a picture of unremitting failure. In all other sectors of the 4th Army, their attacks had been repulsed. To the north, at Gommecourt, the 3rd Army met the same terrible fate. The British High Command could now see the outlines of disaster, but they still didn't comprehend that an estimated 50,000 British soldiers had been killed or wounded in less than 4.5 hours. Little ground had been gained. Despite superhuman courage and determination, only a few yards of shell-ravaged mud were added to the British position. Desperate to salvage something from the morning's calamity, High Command ordered the attack to resume in the afternoon. The troops steeled themselves for a renewed assault against a well-prepared and confident enemy. British commanders and soldiers alike could clearly see the hopelessness of their situation at the front. But the realities were not so apparent to the generals behind the lines. They were cheered by the capture of a few hundred Germans. In London, this newsreel footage of battered and wounded prisoners would be played again and again. The afternoon's attack was a slower-moving repeat of the morning's carnage. High Command's catalogue of errors and misjudgments finally came to light. The handful of soldiers who fought their way into enemy positions were mortified to find trenches and tunnels 30 and 40 feet deep. There, virtually unharmed, the Germans had waited out the bombardment. At the end of the first day of the Battle of the Somme, General Haig had finally seen and heard enough to say, the news was not altogether good. In no man's land lay the remains of half of his army. In all, there were 60,000 British casualties, 20,000 of them dead. Many more thousands were wounded and beyond reach. Those who could be were saved, but others, less fortunate, continued to cry out in vain for days to come. The Battle of the Somme dragged on through the summer and fall of 1916. The casualty toll ultimately rose to 419,000 British and 200,000 French. No advantage was gained by either side, yet one strategic goal was achieved. Verdun was saved. On the Somme's unquenchable killing fields, 600,000 German soldiers were also killed or wounded. When the battle was over, the flower of British youth was gone. But the bitter lessons about the face of modern warfare were taken to heart. Military leaders rushed the armored tank into production to give infantrymen a fighting chance against deadly machine gun and artillery fire. Never again would soldiers be ordered to walk unprotected to certain death. For the British public, the Battle of the Somme became a rallying point. New recruits signed up in even greater numbers. The truth of modern war was concealed for the time being. Only when the Great War ended in 1918 would serious questions be asked about the failure of high command and the lives it squandered at the Somme. Only then did Europe adopt a broader, but ultimately more fragile creed. Never again shall young men be sent to fight a conflict like the war to end all wars.
The Zulu tribes, poorly armed and disorganized, proved to be no match for the British Army on battles that changed the world, continuing next from the Learning Channel.
This program is brought to you in part by California Tourism. Call for free insider vacation tips.
Please press 1 for California Family Fun Trips. Press 2 for nature outings.
Whatever vacation you're pushing for, call 1-800-GO-CALIP and we'll fax or mail you free vacation tips today. Act now while California's weather is nice. Like, that's unusual here.
Dear Linda, thanks to your letters, we've created a safe all-purpose cleaner, new Murphy's Kitchen Care. It won't damage Formica countertops, snow wax floors, or even painted walls. New Murphy's Kitchen Care, safe on all kitchen surfaces.
The Libman Precision Angle Broom. Dirt can't hide from it.
Now, on the Learning Channel, a remarkable series comes to life. A new perspective on the war that divided our nation and united men in battle. A compelling look inside the conflicts, the people, and the places that are etched upon our minds. The world premiere series, Smithsonian's Great Battles of the Civil War. Mondays at 10, Thursdays at 8 on the Learning Channel.
Everybody loves a baby. Not just because babies are unbelievably cute. Not just because they need us so. Not even because we feel a little thrill, a little sadness, watching them grow up. We love them because they keep us young, better than anything else could ever do. Desmond Moritz explains an enduring bond on The Human Animal.
Saturday at 10 on the Learning Channel.
First came the plague, then the flames. 2 years of disaster. Britain's Fire and Fever. Tonight at 10 on TLC Presents.
You're watching the Learning Channel.
Fierce African warriors defending their homeland. Colonial invaders bent on power and wealth. In 1879, the British Empire met the fury of the Zulu Kingdom, and Africa would never be the same. In the 19th century, Britain's empire-building machine ran at full steam. British redcoats marched to the far corners of the world. These loyal troops fought not just to expand the empire, but to bring English-style civilization to the rest of the world. Along with other European nations, Britain turned its attention to the continent of Africa in the late 1800s. Their interest focused on southern Africa, where they had acquired a colony from the Dutch earlier that century. Trouble was no stranger there. Disputes between the native Bantus and the descendants of early Dutch settlers, known as Boers, had precipitated several bloody conflicts. The British governor of the Cape Colony, Sir Bartle Frere, inherited the job of bringing these fragmented Boer colonies and native kingdoms into a single confederation under the rule of the British Crown. It proved to be no